But one of the things, in my experience at least, that you discover as you grow older is that ideas or beliefs that were very closely held at one age often change as you accumulate life experience. It's not necessarily a matter of getting new information, but getting new perspective, which causes you to see things differently. And that leads to change. We'll call that growth, I guess. And growth can be short-term or it can happen long-term. You want to think about long-term growth? I have come to understand that maybe the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences didn't actually snub the Three Stooges for not giving them an Oscar, or by not giving them an Oscar back in '62 for the Three Stooges in Orbit. One of the finest films I had seen in my life to that day. But looking back with perspective, I can see that putting the Three Stooges in Orbit up against West Side Story, Judgment at Nuremberg, The Hustler, and Guns of Navarone probably would have left them a little bit outclassed. So maybe the Academy did the right thing, and I can admit when I'm wrong. Just as in the short term, I can admit the possibility at least that Mike Holmgren may not have been in league with the devil when he defected from the Green Bay Packers to the Seattle Seahawks in '99. I'm not sure my brother's there yet. But it's growth. But there are also certain truths that are immutable, that are unchanging. These are the things that our founders said were self-evident. These are things that you learn or discover. It's a sudden epiphany maybe that you have. And you never change your mind on those once you understand. The inherent right of human beings to be free, for instance. The inherent obligation that we have to help someone else who is in need if we can. Is another example. Or this is near and dear to my heart. The knowledge, the immutable knowledge that the French fry is the world's perfect food. In no small part due to the fact that the French fry is the perfect vehicle for transporting salt into your body. That's an undisputed truth. We'll call that wisdom. For our purposes here, truth is subjective. That's an idea Pontius Pilate would have understood well. Truth does and can change depending upon who is defining what it is. My truths are not the same as yours. Our truths here are not the same as somebody else's somewhere else. What's true to someone today may not be true to them in 20 years, just as we've outlined above. What was true to our slave-holding ancestors a couple of centuries ago, or what was true to our ancestors who saw a divine destiny in kicking Native Americans off their lands and taking the lands from them, those things are not true to us today. And this idea that it can be subjective surely shouldn't be a surprise. 100 years ago, Einstein suggested that as simple a task as answering the question, what time is it, depends upon the observer. And experiments have consistently proven that idea. We know that the passage of time is affected by gravity. It's affected by velocity. And we know this because we've been able to measure it. And if we were smart enough, we might be able to figure out how the curvature of space and the subjective experience of time relate to the concept of eternity. But we're not there yet, and that's a topic for another day. But now that we have kind of a rough first cut idea of the difference between truth and wisdom, I want to take a look at this week's reading. Remember, this reading is called a pericope. That's that $2 word that people invented for a Bible passage. So we want to look at the pericope this week and ask the question, is Jesus dispensing wisdom or truth in the Sermon on the Mount, in this part of it at least? So we'll look at the second part of the reading first, where Jesus is talking about the law. Here Jesus speaks to the idea, which has already, during his lifetime, being floated by some people, that as the Messiah, he has come to upend the law. That he has come to replace the prophets. That he is now here to install something completely new and different, instead of what the Jewish tradition had been to that point. And that's an idea to which Jesus says, no. I'm not here to change God's gift to you. The law was God's gift. Prophets were God's gift. I am not here to change that, he says. I am not here to change what God has been expecting of you and your people for the last 1,000 years or more. Since you guys haven't been doing that hot a job, I'm here to fulfill it. Jesus was telling his disciples in no uncertain terms that everything the law and the prophets had been pointing to over the last many, many generations was now here on earth, in the flesh, standing in front of them. So Jesus was giving them a way to interpret and understand his relationship to the truths with which they had grown up. He was here to tell them how their truths would be changing. And he was giving them a framework that was independent of their own experience with which to interpret his ministry and mission. And just to be clear, Jesus says, guys, if you're counting yourself as a disciple of mine and you lead people away from the law, you're going to find yourself at the very bottom of the list of who's who in the kingdom of heaven. And what he says after that's very important too. It's the second part of Matthew 5:19. And I'll paraphrase it a little bit. Jesus says, whoever does the law teaches it. Whoever lives the prophets teaches them. And they will be reckoned first in the kingdom. So what Jesus is saying here is whoever talks the talk and walks the walk is getting it right. And they're going to be at the top of the list in the kingdom of heaven. That doesn't sound subjective at all. That doesn't sound like it's a matter of perspective. So I'm going to say that Jesus here is sharing wisdom about what it means to be a disciple. And the author of Matthew, by the way, is sharing this very part here to be sure that people understand the importance of righteousness. Remember, we talked about righteousness being a big focus of Matthew. Because by the time Matthew was being written, there's already some thought among followers of Christ that his teachings were actually supplanting the law, and that his teachings were replacing the words of the prophets. And the author wanted to make sure that readers of his gospel knew that wasn't the truth. That's not how it works. So he is sure to include this part of the Sermon on the Mount. He is sure to include Jesus' injunction that if you're going to be in the kingdom of heaven, you have to keep the law better than the Pharisees and the scribes. It was important to Matthew and to Jesus that we understand that there is an unbroken line connecting the very first iterations of God's law. When Moses brought it down from the mountain, connecting that to Jesus' life and ministry. The coming of Jesus was not a new plan. It was not a new version of the plan, but it was the plan in its original concept. Jesus was just the natural outcome of everything that had come before. And that's wisdom worth knowing. So we're good. That's the second part of what we read today. The very first part. Jesus talks about salt. He talks about lamps and light. You are the salt of the earth, Jesus says. You are the light of the world. Those seem like pretty simple declarative sentences. And he utters them without qualification. Meaning he doesn't say, you're the salt of the earth if, or you are the light of the world if. He just makes those statements. And you set aside the metaphors for the moment, and Jesus seems to be speaking very plainly. He's speaking of things that are not subject to shifting perspectives or changes over time. They're not conditional. Jesus is simply pointing to his disciples. He's pointing to his followers and saying, you are the salt of the earth. Guess what? You are the light of the world. And then for clarity's sake, as clear as he can be sometimes, Jesus expands the metaphor a bit and he tries to explain what he's saying. But he is clearly talking about something that is definitively true again and is not going to change. So he's sharing wisdom again. I love this part of the Sermon on the Mount because this is wisdom that is precious to us. Because what he is not saying is he's not saying, do this and you will be the salt of the earth, or do this and you will be the light of the world. He's looking directly at his disciples. He's looking at the 12, and he's looking at the people who have left their homes to follow him, people who have come out to hear and embrace his words. And he's saying, you are the salt. You are the light. By choosing to follow him, they have already become salt and light. By choosing to follow, they have become, that magic spice that both preserves the world and makes it worth experiencing. By choosing to live a life that reflects the light of God's love and grace as it is embodied in Jesus, they have become a light to their neighbors, a beacon of righteousness in a world of darkness. There's a beauty to that idea that just takes my breath away when I read it. And there's an unspoken responsibility to it, too. And that unspoken responsibility can be kind of intimidating. Because if we are the salt, and then we lose our saltiness, as he says. If we fail to enliven and preserve the world around us by our own inaction, then who's going to do that? Who will do it in our place? If we are the light, but we choose instead to keep the light to ourselves, we hide it under a bushel. If we hide it just within the walls of the church and never share it, who will? The truth is, there's nobody in the bullpen. There's no second string. We are the ones that Jesus has entrusted with this. This is the blessing and the burden that we carry. And it's intimidating. But we also know that Jesus trusts us. Because if we hear the words that Jesus uses, he is telling us that he knows we will not disappoint. We will not fall short. And there is hope and beauty in the wisdom of those words. It's just that we're not always good at recognizing it when we see these things. Even when we do them. But we should know that anytime we help someone, when we treat other people with dignity and grace, when we treat other people kindly, when the world is encouraging us to be cruel, when we care, when the world encourages us to just turn away, we are showing who we are. We are showing that we are the salt and the light, children of God. So this week, remember to be wise. Not in the ways of the world, but in the ways of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Remember the trust that he has placed in you. Be the salt. Be the light. Be you. Because Jesus trusts you to be his servant.